Well, hello and welcome to episode 144 of Drink the Movies. I'm Brian here, as always, with Michaela. And Michaela, if you go back to our childhood, we had some animated tales by one Don Bluth, and these tales were tough. These were some tough stories, Michaela. There's no wonder why we turned out the way we did. We had to deal with the trauma of Don Bluth stories.
I mean, that's that. I think that's partly true, but I think that there are two types of people in the world, right? There are people that were all about Disney. They were all about like Mickey Mouse and Sleeping Beauty, and
Don Bluth
um,
wasn't all about Disney.
but he was not. And then there are people that were like in love with like Fievel, in The Fox and the Hound, all these really like dark, sad, like very beautifully like created films, but also like
Mm.
incredibly adult. Like it's like the Land Before Time, right? Like it's either butterflies and rainbows or my mom dies horribly and I'm alone in the middle of nowhere and I'm 7. Like I feel like yeah. And I think for people that are our age, there were quite a few that came out that were, very impressionable upon us. And so maybe you're right. Maybe that is why we are the way we are.
That's
Not
right.
that
Yeah,
we're
we had a
bad. We have
well,
empathy for
no,
people.
we have empathy. Yeah, these stories were kind of ahead of their time. They were almost like what you would think of as like Pixar stories today. There was a lot more kind of emotionally driven, than your princess stories you were getting out of Disney at the time. And these movies, like I said, they came at a very formative time in our lives with Don Bluth Studios, and there were a lot of classics in there. But we're talking about the one today that got us started off here with The Secret of NIMH. Michaela, we're definitely going to need a drink to get through this because this movie is sad, like all of these movies are. But we're going to get into all the sadness. There's some joy to be found. There's some rats. There's some magic. But first, there's a cocktail. So let's do that. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to chat about it.
So, Brian, we started looking at cocktail options for
Mm-hmm.
this film because I feel like it's a children's film, but it's not really a children's film because I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. If you're under the age of 8, you're going to be traumatized watching this. There's a big owl. It's scary. There's a black crow that's like really goofy. There's a cat that can kill you. Not to mention, there's a lot of experimentation on animals. It's very dark stuff for a kid to go through. So, another place that's kind of dark for a kid to go to is Las Vegas, which houses this beautifully wonderful restaurant called Hash House A Go Go. And they are known for the most amazing, like Bloody Marys and fabulous cocktails and like ginormous eggs Benedict that are made from like an
Mm.
entire egg of like a goose egg or something. They're huge. They're amazing. If you ever get to go to a Hash House A Go Go, I strongly recommend it. But they came up with a drink called the Black Crow. And I have to say, looking at it, I was like, this totally resonates because it looks like it's going to be like, it looks sweet, but I think that it's probably quite dangerous and not for the faint of heart.
That's right. Yeah, it's the kind of drink you would put together if you were making your way out into the thorn bush. And yeah, the Black Crow, we're going to befriend a Black Crow in this tale by the name of Jeremy. So let's put this together, Michaela. This is what is commonly referred to as a bourbon smash cocktail, which means that it's delicious and really simple. So go ahead and put in a sugar cube or like a teaspoon of sugar into a rocks glass. Put in a dash or two of bitters. Then you're going to throw in an orange wedge and a couple of blackberries. Now, give all of that a really good muddle. You want to really get the sugar and the juice from those berries, that orange, the bitters, everything really combined up. Get that in there. Knock off your little muddler, put some ice in the glass, and then you're going to put in, I don't know, roughly 2 ounces or so of bourbon. You can garnish it with some blackberries, like in the Hash House A Go Go. It looks like they took the blackberries and kind of dusted those in some sort of like sanding sugar, which is really pretty. That's what you did with yours, Michaela. So check out the website and stuff for pictures of ours. But yeah, you're just going to sip and enjoy this. It's going to have that kind of rich, dark, mysterious flavor of the blackberry. It's mysterious, just like what's going on at NIMH. And I think that this one paired up really nice with the movie.
I agree. I thought this was one of like, I don't want to say one of the better cocktails we've done in a while. It's just, it really resonated with me. I thought it was a really beautiful mix of beautiful looking as well as beautiful tasting. I thought it was really good. But it is not, it's not for the faint of heart. I think the berries at the bottom, like the muddled berries, they kind of soak up some of the alcohol. So I felt like after maybe one or two of these, there was like moonshine muddle berries at the
Mm.
end. Um, yeah, and with the bourbon, that was good. It was a good choice. But you're going to need that because poor Mrs. Brisby deals with a lot of very adult things for a cute and sweet little mouse.
Yeah, she absolutely does. She deals with a lot. But I think that this drink would have helped Mrs. Brisby get on her way. Maybe this was something that what's the little medicine mouse's name? Mr. Ages, is that his name?
Mr. Ages.
Maybe this is the kind of cocktail Mr. Ages would have whipped up for Mrs. Brisby to help her get on, or maybe it would have helped little Timmy get back on his feet a little quicker. I don't know, but I do know that this drink is delicious. So go ahead and mix one of these up, or make your own kind of riff on the bourbon smash. You can swap out those blackberries for basically anything you want, strawberries, blueberries, it's all good. So give that a try. Let us know what you think about it. And I don't know, Michaela, but for now, I'm gonna grab like a box of tissues. I'm gonna grab like a teddy bear to hold while we watch this movie again. It's gonna take me back to that childhood trauma for sure, but it's a good one. So let's take a quick break and we'll get right back into it.
Aurora and Don Bluth Productions present a classic adventure in motion picture entertainment. I must tell you about NIMH. Look there.
Spoiler warning for The Secret of NIMH. If you've not yet watched this 1982 Don Bluth classic, then you should press pause now. You should go fix yourself up a Black Crow cocktail because it's delicious. You should go watch the 92 minutes of the movie because it's real short. And when you've recovered from your internal trauma, you can come back and we can chat about all the things because we are going to do just that.
That's right. Yeah, we are going to talk about all the things, and we're talking about Secret of NIMH today, released in 1982, directed by Don Bluth, and it stars the vocal talents of Elizabeth Hartman as Mrs. Brisby, our head mouse. We're going to be following her story today. Derek Jacobi is voicing Nicodemus. He is like the mysterious elderly leader of the rats. And Dom DeLuise bringing in some comic relief, which is greatly needed, as Jeremy, the beloved Black Crow companion here in this story. So, Michaela, this was based on a book, Mrs. Brisby and the Rats of NIMH. It was written in 1971. It was a children's book by Robert C. O'Brien. Robert C. O'Brien, what are you doing? Who writes children's books like these? What is wrong with these people? What is wrong with these people?
The same people who did like Watership Down or,
Gosh.
Charlotte's Web. I got a great idea. Let's teach children about imminent death, horrible suffering. Yeah, let's do it. How better to do it? Let's find something sweet and cute and pure, like a little baby mouse, and let's throw her in the middle of this science fiction thriller madness. I got a great idea. And let's put like a crow in that seriously, I know crows are supposed to be like not smart birds, like they're depicted really stupidly, but this one is just about takes the cake. He's just and he's allergic to everything, especially cats. I mean,
he's allergic to cats, which is helpful to know when there's a cat that is trying to terrorize you. Yeah, this book would not recommend you letting your children watch. It's going to give them nightmares for sure, but will not give them nightmares is the artwork here by Don Bluth Studios. Don Bluth is world renowned, and the artist that he brought with him from Disney, world renowned at creating some of the most beautiful works of art in terms of animation in history. So this story here, Secret of NIMH, this movie, is pretty important. If you do any like research or reading about Don Bluth, there was kind of like this schism with Disney animation and Don Bluth. So Don Bluth was a Disney animator. He'd worked on
Robin Hood.
He'd worked on Robin Hood. I think his last thing that he did at Disney was Pete's Dragon, doing some animation there for that. But kind of this story came along. There was another story that him and a couple of animators had worked on and really wanted to kind of pitch it to Disney. They said no thanks, not even interested in seeing what you have to say. And then when this book came across the desk of Don Bluth, Don really wanted to adapt it. Went ahead and presented that to Disney. They said no, we've got a mouse named Mickey. We did a mouse story in The Rescuers. Not interested in doing another mouse story. And at that point, Don Bluth had enough, and he said, hey, you guys, I think like 11 in total Disney animators decided to go their separate ways, and they formed Don Bluth Productions, which brought us some very memorable films here. So kind of going back to our childhood, this came out in 1982, so we were probably just a little on the young side to really kind of bring this in. But there was some other stuff that was really big in terms of us, right? So All Dogs Go to Heaven, Anastasia, The Land Before Time is the big one. You and I made our way out to the theater and saw that, so kind of on a re-release. But there are a lot of Don Bluth classics when you think about classic, kind of 80s and 90s animation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think The American Tale is one of the, I don't want to say lesser known. It's definitely, I don't know. It's probably just as traumatic. Watching it as a kid, it wasn't nearly as upsetting as watching it as an adult. Kind of like Land Before Time. I feel like, oh my gosh. But at least in this one, this was the first. We were too young, and I say we were too young to see this, but I remember being real young seeing this, Brian. I mean, I think I might have been 4 or 5, and that's too young. We had drink the movies. We support good parenting choices, and I think that's probably too young.
Well,
for this.
it was rated G in 1982. We had different standards for kids
It had
there.
an owl with glowing eyes. It had an owl with glowing eyes, dude. It had rats that tried to kill people. It's not for kids.
Not for kids. Not for kids. But it is for kids in a way. But it's quite the story for sure. And it's gonna it's gonna pull at the heartstrings. It's gonna make you scary, or it's gonna make you scared. And it has kind of this, I don't know, kind of beautifulness about it, but it's also like supernatural and scary. There's murders in this. This thing is just nuts, Michaela. We better just get into the story, so that way we can get on with our day, and I can go put on something happy, and bring myself back here for sure. So we're gonna start this story off, because this is a movie for kids. Remember, so we're following Mrs. Brisby. She's going to see the doctor because her son is dying. There you go, kids. Happy day. Let's go. Poor little Timmy has fallen ill. He is not well for the world. So she goes to pay a visit to the nearest mouse doctor named Mr. Ages, voiced by Arthur Mallet. Is pretty awesome, and he's like, you're kind of bothering me, but here's like an envelope of stuff. Take this, give it to Timmy. Maybe that'll help. I don't really know, but I gotta go. You gotta go. It's time to go. So she's making her way back home, and then this cat tries to attack her and eat her and kill her. That's not great. But we do meet a pretty friendly ally. He's not even really an ally. He just kind of shows up and is nonsensical. But we're going to meet Jeremy the Black Crow.
Jeremy the Black Crow, indeed. And Jeremy is one of my favorite characters of this film. He really makes it work. He's the only comedic kind of comedy relief in this whole thing. I feel I'm trying to think about anything else that doesn't have him in it, and it's a funny scene. He's just so whimsically ridiculous. He is voiced by Dom DeLuise himself. Amazing. He is so funny and ridiculous. He wants a girlfriend so bad, and he has like all these strings, and we see rope and strings kind of as a theme throughout this whole film. He is like, I'm trying to build a love nest because I'm trying to find a girl, and Mrs. Brisby is not interested in any of that. She just wants to get home. But he is allergic to cats, which is great because he can warn Mrs. Brisby of a cat. He's a little late on that, and so there's this whole giant like action sequence where the cat is literally trying to kill and eat Mrs. Brisby the mouse, and you're really terrified, and you think for a minute she's lost the medicine that Mr. Aegis has given her, and he is not a very warm and fuzzy mouse. He is like a grumpy old curmudgeon-y guy, and so you really feel bad because she's like, I'll have to go back tomorrow and beg and plead for him to give me more medicine. And luckily Jeremy found it, and so he's like this would-be hero, but he's like so clumsy and just a big galoot and like an oof, like he's just an oof, like an oof, an oaf. He's like an oaf. But that's like how this story starts, right? So when you think about like a single mom, everybody notices and everybody keeps saying that her husband, whose name was Jonathan, he's passed away and he's dead. So she's got these kids at home. They live in a giant cement block on the side of a farm.
Yep.
And they, she's coming home from this day of hell. she's got wounds from this cat. She's got Timmy's medicine. And what does she come home to? Her kids screaming at this well-meaning yet very annoying neighbor named Auntie Shrew, who's just there to tell them that they better pack up and move because the tractor man, the farmer's going to come with his tractor and run over their house. So they really need to get going and get out and figure out where they're going to live, because in a couple of days, they won't have a home anymore. And that creates a real problem for the whole family, because Timmy, little Timmy, he has pneumonia and he can't leave the bed.
That's right.
Don't quite understand that, because we had people that were like raring around in the world dying of COVID, but that's okay. We can't let Timmy out of bed for like 3 weeks. And that's really a problem, because moving day is nearly here and they're all going to get chopped up to bits by this tractor.
That's right. Yeah, you gotta move out because the tractor's coming to plow the field, and that's going to, I guess, dislodge the cinder block. It's going to crush the house. That's going to be bad. You mentioned the farm has this cat. The cat's name is Dragon, I think. Dragon. It is like the most like grisly looking cat you've ever seen. It's got like an eye clawed out. It's all got like razor teeth. This cat is out for blood. It's good at hunting mice, I guess.
It's the size of a small crocodile.
That's pretty scary. So, Mrs. Brisby would not have been blamed if she would have just went for one of these Black Crow cocktails. That's what I would have done when I would have gotten home. But yeah, she has the medicine there for Timmy, and she gives him that and said, we got to get you better, Timmy. We got to go because our house is going to get crushed. That's going to be bad. And you mentioned she has another couple of kids. They're always kind of clowning around. So I guess that's kind of fun. You have Jeremy for some comic relief. The kids are having fun. I mean, it would do my head in if I was Mrs. Brisby. I'd be like, I'm trying to deal with some stuff, kids. Could you calm down? Could you please relax a little bit? But she's going to need some extra help, right? So she's going to go. She tries to go back to Mr. Ages. Mr. Ages is like, no, I told you I don't want to help you. Leave me alone, because he is curmudgeonly. On a side note, don't get a job like in like public health or dealing with the public if you're going to be curmudgeonly like Mr. Ages. But he says maybe go talk to the owl. Maybe the owl can help you. And what do mice fear most in the world? Well, it's the cat first, but then it's owls. What do owls do? They eat mice. You don't want to go to the owl. That's bad news. Mrs. Brisby has a rough go in this movie.
She does. But I just want to talk about a little bit about the theme of this, right? Because I love that kind of the first act of this, where she is desperate to help her son, help her children move. She's on her own, and she is relying on the goodness of others because she has to, but she's not going to give up. And so when she's told, hey, you need to go to the great owl. This owl, by the way, lives in the scariest tree I've ever seen in my life. Okay. Yep. Halloween got nothing on this. Okay. This is absolutely terrifying. There's a spider the size of Texas that lives in that tree, and we see it, and it's horrifying. The animation is amazing. I've never seen a spider so scary in my life. It is awful, but she just does it. She gets on the back of Jeremy the Crow, and he takes her to the great owl, and she's like terrified, but she's not going to give up. And I really love that. And I love the scene where she finally gets home and her kids are screaming at Auntie Shrew, and Auntie Shrew is like telling her that her kids are brats. And she's like, it's definitely something that any mom can resonate with, because she's just like, can y'all just not, while I go and try and give your son, like my other kids, some medicine to keep him from dying? And then the kids are like, gosh, Mom, I'm sorry. And it's like this really sad moment where then they all rally behind like Timmy's bed, and they're like, is Timmy gonna die? Oh gosh. And they realize it becomes quite serious. And then Martin's now going to be traumatized for life, because the one time he mouths off and is like a mouthy smarmy kid, like his mom is like, your brother's gonna die, leave me alone. It's really awful. But this tree where that great owl is, we see some of the most like intense, terrifying moments that I remember as a kid. I mean, this was probably my first like psychological thriller / horror movie that I ever saw. Because you see this spider, and the spider comes through, and the animation is just breathtaking.
Gorgeous, yeah.
It is amazing. I mean, Don Bluth really worked very hard to do quote unquote traditional kind of animation crafts here in this film. And he really felt that we were getting, computer animation was more and more becoming a thing. Even in the 80s, they were using different techniques that we saw in things like My Little Mermaid towards the end of that decade, and Aladdin and things like that. And so this is very different. It very much is hearkening itself back to, the 50s and 60s of animation, where you really saw they had to use very different techniques. And one of the things that they did that we see in the great owl scene when she meets the great owl is this backlighting technique that really lets the eyes of the great owl glow. And it's one of the best, scariest, most beautiful scenes, because the owl at first doesn't want to help her at all. He does help her by killing the spider with his bare hands, and that's awful. But then he's like, you need to move your family. And she's like, well, duh, dude, but I need help doing that because I can't do it. And she mentions her name. And of course, he stops and he says, oh my gosh, you're Jonathan Brisby's wife? And she says, yes. And he's like, oh, well, then what we need to do is you need to go to the rats. And I love how he says it. It's like a tagline that I've used for my whole life. But he tells her, the rats in the rose bush, they will help you. And she's like, I don't think they will. And you're like the fifth person I've asked for help, dude, and you're just going to pass the buck. But that's what he says before he turns his head all the way around and then flies off into the darkness to go kill probably one of her cousins or something.
Yeah, to go get another mouse to eat. Yeah, so she is on her way to go talk to the rats. Yes, another group of people that don't like mice. Apparently is what we're left to believe here from that. I really like this. She kind of goes into she makes her way to like the rat lair. It's kind of in like this bush kind of thing, and it's really kind of neat, almost in a similar sense to going into the tree, but it's kind of mysterious. And you see like Nicodemus. The movie actually opens with like Nicodemus like reading like this tome from this book. So we kind of see Nicodemus around there back like in his little lair, and she's like trying to sneak in. There's like this guard rat that's tracing her around kind of this thing, but eventually she gets to Nicodemus, and he again recognizes her as the wife of this Jonathan there, which is another bad thing for Mrs. Brisby. You got a sick kid, your house is about to be crushed, and everyone just keeps reminding you about your dead husband. That's not ideal either. But apparently Jonathan was pretty important to the rats. So we learn kind of here from Nicodemus, who is this chief rat, that there were all the rats were in this place called NIMH. It's right in the title, right? NIMH. What is that? Well, NIMH is apparently the place where they did a bunch of animal testing and stuff on these rats, but luckily her husband Jonathan was there and sprung the rats out. They were ever in the debt of Jonathan.
That's right, because he was little and the rats were too big. And there were a number of rats and mice that were injected with this stuff that made them incredibly intelligent. They could all of a sudden like read. It slowed the aging process down. So he was going to be like 25 forever or something. Well, the mice version of 25 was probably like 3 weeks. I have no idea. I'm not a zoologist, but they were in the debt of Jonathan Brisby. So anytime they could do anything to help his family, they're doing it now, which begs the question, why weren't they doing it earlier? I don't know. Maybe they didn't know he was married. I have no idea. But I want to talk a little bit about the animation around this rose bush, because it looks like a rose bush on the outside, but when you get into the rose bush, it is like this maze of wonder. I mean, there's lots of scary things, and then there's this.
It's very like cavernous. It's very cavernous. There's like a lake in it. Like, yeah, it's like if you would go into like a cave of wonders, sort of thing. It's like your innermost cave if you're adapting your hero's journey kind of steps right there. But yeah, it's very cavern like. It's very beautiful, but very very dark and mysterious. And definitely Miss Brisby is out of her element, but she's at kind of her wit's end. But luckily, Nicodemus, obviously recognizes her and is going to be willing to help, and kind of rallies the rats around the cause and says, we can help you because we're advanced rats. We can use electricity. We can read from books. We can use pulleys to get your cinder block house out of there instead of just, carrying your kid, I guess, which seemed like it might have been easier on a side note, but I just thought of that right now. A little bit of a plot hole, but that's okay. That's all right. That's okay. Yeah. So they decide they're going to use these ropes. Again, the texture on the animation of the ropes, it really reminds me of Nicodemus himself. So Nicodemus has that backlighting in his eyes as well. So he's got this glowing eye style going on. And he really recognizes that Jonathan, he might have been a super, super intelligent mouse. He picked a really interesting partner in his wife because she is just a normal mouse, but she could learn to read a little bit.
and he taught her, and he never told her about any of this because he was probably going to live a lot longer than she was. And so she, he figured that this was a secret that he could keep for a long time. And so he ended up dying again in service to the rats because he's small and nimble, and he was going to Dragon, the cat, so that they could do an experiment or they could move something, and they could do it freely in the middle of the night without getting eaten. So unfortunately, he got eaten instead. And so they again are like, look, we're going to use this pulley system. We're going to move your cinder block to the other side of the stone. I don't know the lee of the stone. I still don't quite understand what that means, but they're going to move it. I don't really know how far, but Nicodemus is like, rats, we're going to get ready. We're going to do this. And that would be fine, except there is a really bad rat in amidst all of these other rats. His name is Jenner. I don't like that name. He is really tall and like suave. He thinks that he's like pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, but he is just out for power. And he thinks that this is a great opportunity to create a diversion and then a so-called accident where the pulley system fails and the cinder block ends up landing on Nicodemus, and then they don't have to follow Nicodemus anymore. And why is that important? Well, I never understood this as a kid, and we could talk a little bit about this. But Nicodemus's idea was that they wanted to stop stealing electricity from the farm, because that's what they were doing, is they were sneaking in and getting like power cords and things so that they could carry on with their work underneath the farm. And they didn't want to continue to do that. They wanted to kind of go public and be like, hey, we're not normal rats, and we're not going to be able to live like normal rats, and figure out a way to kind of live in harmony. Jenner was not interested in that at all. He's like, look, I want to stay in this rose bush. I want everybody to report up to me, and I want to continue stealing. I don't have a problem with this. They're never going to accept us, blah, blah, blah. So his answer to all of this is just kill Nicodemus off. And then what are they going to do? They're going to have to follow him, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's where we're at.
That's where you're at. Yeah, he Jenner is no good, right? He sees Mrs. Brisby comes in, and he's like, meh, don't help her. Meh, we shouldn't move. I'm gonna kill Nicodemus. I'm gonna take over. But luckily there is a rat that is loyal to Nicodemus in all of this. His name is Justin. On a side note, he couldn't have come up with names that didn't start with J. It's a lot of J names I have to keep track of right now. So Justin, he is this very like tall, dark, and handsome rat, right? Like you think Mrs. Brisby is gonna be like, I'm into this Justin guy. He seems pretty good, but he's loyal to Nicodemus, and he wants to help, right? So Justin is going to take Mrs. Brisby, and you'd mentioned it, right? They'd done it they tried to do it before when Mrs. Brisby's husband died. Jeremy, right? But if you're going to move this block, you gotta get this cat out of the equation. The cat's going to come and eat all of you. Did you see the cat at the beginning of the movie? The cat is terrifying. So what you got to do, you got to go in, you got to put the cat to sleep, you got to slip something into its food, but only a mouse can do it. Rats are too big, they can't get through the hole or something, which is a lie, but only a mouse can do it. So they're going to boost her in. She is very brave. She's going to go, and she gets the stuff in. She gets the cat put to sleep, gets the sleep stuff put in his food, but unfortunately this dumb kid at the farmhouse is going to capture her in a bucket, and then she gets put into like this bird cage. And this is always my favorite part of the movie, is watching Mrs. Brisby like figuring out how to get out of this cage, because she overhears a phone call with the people from NIMH, and they're going to come and like get all the rats. They're going to like tear up the rose bush and capture all the rats, because they don't want it getting out that they're super smart rats or something like that, I think. So she needs to get back to the rats and tell them that they need to hurry. The clock is ticking. And she's trying to figure out how to get out of it, and she ends up like pushing the little water dish so she can like swim out of it. It's pretty awesome. Love it. Love Mrs. Brisby. She's the bravest little mouse of all time.
She is a total heroine. Yes. She is a BA. I love her. She's definitely when I think of like a single mom, this was probably the first like single mom story I'd ever really saw as a kid as well. And so I really love that. So she's in this cage. Justin had to leave her behind. They're in the process of moving her house. Now, we should talk about this, because you would think that they would let the kids know that their house was being moved. You think that they would let Annie Shrew know that their house was being moved. No. Why do that? Why let them know? And so they're in this block of concrete that is being like the ropes are wrapped around. There's a pulley system. It's being lifted out of the mud. Of course, it's pouring down rain, so the mud is gross. And the animation here is just amazing. But the kids are like, "What's going on?" And there's like candles that are lit inside the block that are flying everywhere, and Auntie Shrew gets knocked out, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is bad. This is like what's happening." And of course, Jenner figures out where Nicodemus is going to be, and right at the right moment, he cuts the line. The pulley breaks, and the concrete block falls down, and Nicodemus is in fact killed. Justin is trying to see him, and again, it's very very dark, because while you don't see the gore, you see enough to know that he's now a crushed old mouse and dead. And so now they're like, well, there's nothing we can do. Jenner's like, I'm sorry, but we're gonna not be able to do anything. We've moved your house enough. I mean, your house should be fine. And Mrs. Brisby shows up just in the nick of time to see this, and she's checking out the kids, and she can hear the kids inside, but she can't get to them. And they're like, oh, it's Mom, are you there? And then she realizes that the house is starting to sink.
That's right. Yeah, it's a very rainy and muddy night there that they're trying to get the cinder block pulled up out of its home and get it moved. So when it falls, yeah, it's going to start sinking back into the mud. She's trying to warn them that the people from NIMH are coming, but you have the rats battling for power, right? You have Jenner there, who is now knocked off Nicodemus. He needs to get Justin out of the picture now. He's going to go and try to kill Justin. Luckily, had kind of a turncoat on Jenner's side that ends up kind of coming to the aid of Justin there and throwing a knife into Jenner's back. So that problem is solved. But what are we going to do about the cinder block? It's sinking. Well, luckily, if you're Mrs. Brisby, you're going to use your head. You're going to be like, hey, what was that thing that Nicodemus gave me earlier? And we didn't talk about this because Nicodemus gave her like this little medal, like this little medallion kind of thing, and it has magic powers. She was reading through like the rat tome, and it's like, oh, if you're like pure of heart and you really like need it, this little medallion is going to come to your aid in some sort of supernatural way. We don't really know how it works, but it's going to work if it ever needs to. And the time to put that thing to use is right now, because this thing is sloshing down into the mud. Those three kids are not long for the world, including poor Timmy, who's still laying in bed, I guess. Not good.
This was really hard to watch as a kid. It's even harder, I think, to watch as an adult, because there's literally mud like seeping into the house, and they're like, Mom, I don't know what's going on. Well, I can't breathe very well. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's like watching Titanic, but it's mud. It's even worse. I don't know how could be possibly worse, but Mrs. Brisby uses this amulet. We think all hope is completely lost because they can't. The rats
are gone. The pulleys are gone.
Yeah. The pulleys are gone. The rats are there. They're all exhausted.
The rats are like, peace out. They're like, nope, didn't work, out of here.
Yeah. Well, they're also like, Justin is trying, but he's exhausted from having to fight and kill Jenner, right? And so they're all like, what do we do? And so they the amulet gets lost for a second. It's underneath the mud, and she ends up grabbing it, and she holds it up, and like there's the flames come out of it. It's very terrifying. And then the amulet does its magic and levitates the cinder block up out of the mud, and then moves it to where it needed to be. And even as a kid, I was like, well, why didn't we just do that in the first place? That would have been great. But maybe she had to just be really brave all those times, because it's not enough to be almost eaten by a cat and almost eaten by a owl and almost killed by rats like 3 times and almost eaten by the cat a second time and almost like be, I don't know, fodder for a kid named Billy. I mean, maybe those 5 things had to happen in order for that amulet to work. I'm not sure. But it's really beautiful the way that it shows the concrete block kind of lifting up and going exactly where it should be and setting down really beautifully. And like all the mud, it like kind of is drained out of it. So the kids are fine and everything's fine and Timmy's going to be okay. And it's going to be all fine. But poor Mrs. Brisby, she's real tired at the end of this. And she like totally falls down and is like totally exhausted. She loses her cloak even. It's amazing.
Yeah, her little cape, yeah. She's gonna have to go away to like a tropical destination, rest up after all this shenanigans for sure. But yeah, good news is the cinder block is safe. It's moved, it's out of the way of this plow now, so everyone is safe and sound there. The rats decide that they are going to move on, right? They have Justin is the leader of the rats. He's going to take over for Nicodemus now, and the rats are going to resettle, and that's how our rats end up. But luckily, we're gonna find out some more good news. Everything has a happy ending, right? Because Jeremy, our Black Crow friend, is just gonna turn up at the end and be like, "Hey, I have a girlfriend now." There you go. So
that's not what happens. I mean, he finds the girl. Well, like she ends up being just as clumsy as he is, and runs into him and is like, "Oh my gosh, are these all your strings?" And he's like, "Yup, I got them just for someone like you." And she's like, "That's great. Excuse me, pardon me." It's so amazing. And then they've got these strings attached to them, so now they can't leave each other's side. And now they're stuck together forever.
And now they're stuck together forever. That's right. So all's well that ends well, I guess. And Mrs. Brisby, congratulations. You did it. Mission accomplished. Everything is going to be a-okay. And that is the end of the story. So we went through that pretty quick. We gave it a lot of slack for being this pretty dark tale. I don't know. It's rated G, so I guess you would think that it's aimed at kids. I think that it is kind of partially aimed at kids, right? It's based off of this children's book. On a side note, I guess the children's book is way even darker than this. Like it focuses a lot more on like the like animal stuff. Like at NIMH, there's not this kind of like supernatural element to it. That was something that Don Bluth added to it because apparently he thought that all children's movies and stories should have some sort of supernatural element to it, which is kind of interesting. An interesting way to look at your storytelling, I think. But I think we kind of glossed over the fact that this is just maybe the most gorgeous animated movie ever. It's staggeringly beautiful. And the Bluth animation, I mean, it always, gets high praise for the way that it looks, but this one I think really looks the best. He was coming out, his tempers were flaring, I think, from the dust ups there with Disney, and really wanted to prove what him and his team could do with the story. And it looks just absolutely gorgeous. I know there's a couple particular elements about this movie that you always get reminded of when you think about Secret of NIMH. Michaela, do you want to talk about that a little bit and how it relates to our animation here?
Yeah, the things that remind me the most. So go to the rats, I guess, that part. Or is that
I thought you were going to talk about the bubbles. You talk about the bubbles.
Oh my gosh! Every time I talk about
it, you're like, hey, in 5 months, we're going to talk about Secret of NIMH, and it has the best bubbles. Hey, remember in a couple months, we're going to be watching Secret of NIMH. Best bubbles ever. Oh, man, I just watched it. Best bubbles. You talk about these bubbles all the time. Now you're not even going to talk about them. Oh, my gosh.
It's true. Okay, so here's the thing with the bubbles.
You're too traumatized to remember.
I'm too traumatized. No, definitely the bubbles. Let's talk about it, because at the opening sequence, when we have that fight with Dragon, right, she is brought into like a windmill, like one of those water mill things. It is amazing. You think she's going to drown. There are bubbles in that. Those bubbles look different than the bubbles that are in the little syringes that are being shot into the poor little rats. There are bubbles in the down when they have this elevator that's so cool, and it's an elevator that is watertight, and they bring the rats of NIMH underneath the rose bush. They bring her down in it, and you see these bubbles kind of float up, and they look different than these bubbles that are made out of mud, and you see them like popping and blowing up and exploding, and they do it in such a beautiful way. And the sound design for this film is absolutely epic. I mean, it's so good, the way in which you really feel like they had to go to like a mud pit in Montana in like Yellowstone and like copy that sound. I don't know how they did it, but they really did it beautifully. And it's so good. That piece of animation is insane. And what I didn't know was all of the glowy parts where you have like the eyes that are glowing for Nicodemus or the owl. All of that was a very special type of animation that they used with this backlit technique. And I'm not doing it justice, but I mean, this film really, in my opinion, kind of set a different stage for animated films. And it's interesting because now Disney has such a monopoly. I feel like Disney Pixar has such a monopoly on films that come out. Everyone that comes out, people are like, oh, that's going to win an Oscar, or at least it's going to be nominated. And this to me was like one of the films that I cherished, even though it's terrifying and sad, growing up with, that was not a Disney film. That wasn't a Disney animated classic, right? And it really led the way for, I think, a lot of other non-Disney-fied options out there to go and see as far as animation techniques. And it really fueled my love for like non-mainstream animated classics.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Now I don't know about you, Michaela, but for myself, like, seeing this, and even like All Dogs Go to Heaven and Land Before Time, American Tail, like, I think probably just because of my age, like I never even really like associated those with the fact that they weren't Disney films. They were just other like cartoon movies, right? They were just other animated movies. So I didn't really have like any sort of like differentiation between those until maybe like Anastasia came out, when I guess probably would have been, a little bit older than at that point. And then it was made like very clear, I think probably in the marketing, that, it was by Don Bluth Productions, the studio that brought you all of these other things. And then, it started to be a little bit more separate kind of in that way. But I don't know. We, we give this movie the jostle because it is pretty dark, and it is pretty dark. That's absolutely correct. But it's a really good movie. It's really well made. The voice acting is really well done. The sound design you hit on is really well done, and it's definitely worth watching. I don't know if I would let like a 4 or 5 year old watch it, like we would have been when we watched this for sure. Maybe, or at least make sure that your parental guidance thing there is pretty tough. But I don't really remember actually, and I kind of made fun of it or joked about it a little bit, but I don't really remember being like super scared about this stuff. But I do remember being like, this is some dark stuff. I think maybe it's because I had an older brother, so I was just there, and he can show me the ways of bravery in the world or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I thought the owl part was scary to me. The scariest part to me was the scene where she gets stopped by a Brutus the rat and she gets chased out, and Mr. Ages ends up finding her and telling her she can come back in because she's asking for help. And this guy is terrifying, and he's got this spear, and he's like scaring her. And that part I did not like as a kid. And I did not like when she was in the cage and she was trying to get out, and she ends up hurting herself to get out a little bit. Like, she's okay, but you can like, there's blood. And I was like, nope, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like that she's in a cage. I really don't. That part. And then the cool part that they do, I guess they're trying to do strings of like DNA or strings of molecules when they show the transformation from NIMH. That is probably really tough. Again, the score of this is amazing because it's got these crashing sounds, but these really striking notes from the strings. And it's really scary. I think for me, it scared me. So did you watch this? I guess you wouldn't have seen it in the theater because we were babies, but did you get it on like VHS? Do you remember getting it from like your library or?
Yeah, kind of like most things around that time would have been something that we rented from the library, for sure. And I remember seeing this, fairly young. And obviously, I'd mentioned, Land Before Time. That was a real important movie to me growing up, which just came out a couple years later, and same kind of thing. I would have just been rented. But yeah, I remember watching this, periodically throughout kind of my whole childhood, as just being something that would get rented from time to time. I think probably the runtime aided in that, I think, for the parents. But I think that, I kind of mentioned it and likened it in the top as kind of, more of this like Pixar model where these are, they're animated children's movies, but like the content and things are really kind of geared at, the parents, the adults, as much as it is the kids that are watching it. So I think that from that standpoint, that it really went over very well, and that was kind of a theme and a thread through the Don Bluth films as well. They weren't kind of talking down to the audience. It was very kind of brave and bold, I guess, to make films in this style that were tackled darker subjects, right? Like death and illness and losing your home and all of those things. So I think that it was pretty great, and I'm assuming you probably kind of got into this train similar ways.
Yeah, I don't remember I saw it when I lived in Montana, so I was younger than 6. And so I think I was 4 or 5 when I saw this for the first time, and I immediately recognized that this was not like a Disney film because there was no singing except at the end with the 2 birds that couldn't be untorn, right? And they're like little ribbons made a heart, and you had the dream by night, wish by day, like song, right? But there was no one broke into song, which is different than I think many of the others, because even the American Tale, there's like parts of the song, like there's parts of the movie that break out into song, right? This was not that. It was very different, and I was like, this is it kind of, I don't know, it spawned my love for certain like dark fantasy, I think, too. And so I remember seeing it at that point, and then I watched Land Before Time, but I found that so traumatizing that I think I clung onto American Tail and held on for the ride for the next 10 years because All Dogs Go to Heaven I saw one time and it was enough. I never want to see that film again. We can't cover it because I'll just cry the entire time. Who wants to see a movie about a bunch of dogs that are dying? That's awful. Like, Don Bluth, I love you, but what were you thinking, dude?
He's Don, you monster. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, these are darker tales for sure, but they're really good, and I really liked going back and watching this. It was fun. I mean, even watching it with my wife, who also remembered watching this from her childhood, so it was cool to go back and put it on and watch it again. And if you've never seen it, we we definitely didn't do the actual story any justice here. You'll definitely get the vibe we're going for with how dark this was and things like that. So I'm watching the trailer right now. That spider just dropped down, so scary. Yeah, so give this one a try. Give it a watch if you've never seen it, and if you watched it, as a child, watch it again with some adult eyes. Maybe that's going to be a good time. Share it with your friends. Share it with us. We want to know your stories about Secret of NIMH. If you ever saw the sequel to Secret of NIMH, what's that called? It's called like Timmy's Big Day or something. Timmy's Revenge. Secret of NIMH 2. Timmy to the rescue. Timmy finally shows up. He finally gets over his. He finally gets over his sickness. Yeah. So let us know that. Let us know what your favorite Don Bluth movie is. It's going to be Land Before Time. That's the best one for sure. Yeah. Let us know that. Let us know if you make a Black Crow, because that was a really good drink, or if you have any other fun bourbon smashes. Let us know that. Send us pictures of your cocktails, all that stuff. You can do that on our social medias. It's Instagram, X, and Threads. It's at Drink the Movies, and on Facebook.com/Drink the Movies. Go to our website, www.drinkthemovies.com, if you want to see pictures of our cocktail recipes, episode recaps, all that stuff. You can do that on the website, and you want to make sure you go over and check out our Patreon if you want some more bonus content. That's patreon.com/drinkthemovies. We've got polls for our monthly episodes, polls for Drink the Music. If we're still doing that, by the time you're listening to this, hopefully the strikes are over if you're listening to this. So we'll see what we're doing there, but we got a lot of fun stuff on the Patreon, so make sure you go check that out. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast, so that way, when our next movie and cocktail comes out, you're going to be ready to go. It's going to be already waiting for you when you wake up in the morning. Michaela, where can they do that?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, whatever you're listening to right now. It has a subscription button, so press subscribe or follow. We are super excited to be able to talk about movies. If you're listening to this, we're able to talk about movies again, which is really great. I really hope that it's not too much longer before we learn from our mistakes and pay people what they're worth, because we're all about that at Drink the Movies. But until then, if you like us, tell your friends. If you like us, tell your friends. It really helps us get all the Drink the Movies out there.
Absolutely. So that is going to wrap up Secret of NIMH. Michaela, I don't know, you owe me something for making me drudge up my emotions again. I wasn't ready for that. We're getting into some fall weather, and Secret of NIMH, I guess, feels like a good fall weather movie. It's I don't know, comforting in that way, despite its darkness for sure. So
It's
do
true.
that. I'm gonna have to have another one of these Black Crow cocktails. That'll help
Yeah.
me cope. So
Uh,
you're in charge. You go mix that up as penance for bringing this movie to me and to everyone, to yourself, for sure. So let's do that, and we'll talk to everyone next time on
Drink
Drink the
the movies.
Movies.
Courage of the heart is very rare. When you do, the stone knows when it's there.